Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the President of China, Xi Jinping, met on August 31 at Tianjin on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. It was perhaps the most globally watched of all Prime Minister Modi's foreign outings in 11 years that he has been in office. No surprise, as the meeting, which took place during Mr. Modi's first visit to China since the Ladakh clashes in 2020, came immediately after what seems to be a breakdown of India's relations with the US. What were the objectives of this meeting and its achievements for India and China apart from its optics? Are these objectives mutually compatible? Has India managed to put across its core concern, which is a mutually, peacefully, and politically resolved boundary settlement that addresses all issues, including the ones that arose from the Chinese aggression in Ladakh in 2020? Did India take up with China other sensitivities? Welcome to Latitude. I'm Nirupama Subramanian, and with me to discuss the meeting that reverberated around the world is one of India's foremost China specialists, Jabin T. Jacob. Professor Jacob teaches at the Shiv Nadar University's Department of International Relations and Governance Studies, and he's also director at the university's Center for Himalayan Studies. India-China relations, China-South Asia relations, and Chinese domestic politics are his specializations. Thank you for participating in this program, Professor Jacob.
Thank you, Nirupama. Pleasure to be here.
Professor Jacob, can we start with the outcomes of this very important meeting? From the Indian side, what were the outcomes of this visit, and what did the Chinese take away from this meeting?
So I think in terms of outcomes, we saw a reiteration of most of what was agreed between the two special representatives when Mr. Wang Yi visited Delhi a few weeks before the summit. And we saw the Prime Minister highlight some of those. I think one of the things that he said was that now there's peace and stability on the LAC following the disengagement process. So I think that's a signal that the disengagement process is complete post-Galwan, that it is complete. I mean, we can have a debate about whether this is a sustainable thing or not, but as far as the government is concerned, the official line is that disengagement is complete and that peace and stability exists for the moment. The other outcomes, of course, he repeated, the fact that the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has been restarted. So, I mean, in terms of priorities, clearly for the government, these are the important issues. Possibly the resumption of direct flights, I think he made a mention of that as well. Visa facilitation, all of these things which were between the two special representatives. I think that's more or less the case. And we were not really expecting at a multilateral summit, on the sidelines of a multilateral summit, any major breakthroughs in bilateral ties. So this is just a reiteration of what the two special representatives had already agreed on. For all that, I think this is, it's been talked about as a reset. And I would be very careful about using this word because this word has been used before and we've come up short and we've sort of had major changes subsequently. So let's just say that this is at the moment sort of an uneasy stage of stability in the relations. We have the process of de-escalation and de-induction of troops continuing. That needs to be carried out at the LAC. Right now, I think the focus is to put aside the security side of things, the border issue, and to focus on the economic problems in the relationship. And the Chinese have been engaged in economic coercion, so there's a problem that we have there as well.
So, Professor Jacob, on the border question, which is India's core concern, both leaders are said to be satisfied with the disengagement last year and the maintenance of peace and tranquility along the border areas since then. They have stated a commitment to a fair, reasonable, and mutually acceptable resolution of the boundary question, proceeding from the political perspectives of their overall bilateral relations and the long-term interests of the two peoples. I'm reading this rather wordy thing from the Indian readout of how it went. So what does this specifically mean with regard to the territory in Ladakh where the disengagement has taken place, and which was the actual source of this 5-year breakdown in ties?
So I think the last disengagement, decision, over Depsang and Demchok, I think at that point it was agreed that we would not reopen any of the previous agreements. And in the previous agreements on disengagement, there was the question of buffer zones for patrolling between the two sides, applicable equally to the Indians and the Chinese. So I mean, and now that the Prime Minister has said that there's peace and stability, essentially, I don't think anybody wants to go back to re-examining the nature of the disengagement process itself. So, as things stand, the troops will remain on the border. I think that de-escalation is not likely to happen anytime soon. Both sides will continue building up infrastructure. And the Indian side has really put in massive efforts to build up infrastructure over the last few years. And that, I suppose, also is its own guarantee of peace, in a sense that we are, at least for the immediate term, I think, unlikely to see the kind of bust-up that was Galwan. The idea is also to ensure that patrols don't come face-to-face. So I think there's a very sharp sort of a lookout for anything that might set off, the kind of fisticuffs that was happening regularly, before 2020. So I think, I can't speak to the territorial question. I mean, that's part of a larger issue. But as of now, the primary focus has been on ensuring that, as the two leaders keep saying that, tensions shouldn't spiral into confrontation or conflict. I think that is that's a sort of a very low bar, but it is an important bar in the relationship.
Yeah, so India's language has also changed with regard to the Ladakh clashes. At the height of the crisis, of the Ladakh crisis, the language was that there can be no business as usual unless status quo ante of April 2020 is restored. And now it is that there has to be peace and tranquility on the border, which now both sides accept that there is peace and tranquility on the border. So there is no reference to the status quo ante of April 2020. So how significant is this change of language with regard to our claims in that area?
So the language has certainly changed. Now there is the point has been made that there are no government documents that actually say status quo ante. It's but the claim has certainly been made that there cannot be business as usual from important government sources, including the foreign minister. He's said regularly the situation is not normal. Now, clearly, the situation is still not normal, but the objective conditions, regional conditions, and international conditions have changed. And it is the stuff of international politics that when the conditions change, everybody has to sort of be flexible and walk back from previous statements. And that is exactly what the Indian government is doing. I don't think it's very surprising, but I would say that the levels of distrust remain high. So that's another reason why I think the government feels it possible to, do what it is doing right now. Give the impression that things are getting back on track, or trying to make an effort to push the economic relationship forward, because they know that on the military side things are more or less under control. I think that's something that we'll have to go with. I mean, we'll have to take the government's word for it. There's also evidence, that the military, has no illusions about this entire relationship. infrastructure buildup is on in full swing. So I think on that front, perhaps I think it's now possibly time to shift attention to, okay, why all of this happened. I mean, look, there has never been an accountability exercise. There has been an effort to rectify mistakes, but there is also needs to be an accountability exercise so that we don't repeat previous mistakes or we don't make new ones.
Accountability exercise within
the government of India, yes. Yeah, and it has to be public, of course, because the public also deserves an answer, right? I mean, discussion in parliament, briefings for opposition leaders, all of these things are part of and parcel of the normal process of foreign policy making.
You mean accountability for why those clashes took place? Why?
How did we miss the signals, right? What is it in our mechanisms that did not allow us to anticipate? I mean, the fact is that the record from 2013 onward shows that the Chinese transgressions were changing from previous transgressions, qualitatively as well as quantitatively, in a manner of speaking. 2013, 2014, 2017, and so in a way, one should have anticipated this. I mean, people in the know should anticipate this, but we assume that the India-China relationship was progressing in a linear fashion. And that obviously wasn't the case.
And so, did we put too much emphasis also on the personal relationship that was thought to exist between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi?
Well, I think there are two things here. One, yes, on the diplomatic front, we tried something new. We thought that the informal summits would get us and in with the Chinese, etc. But the Chinese are looking at the India-US equation. But on the military side too, I think there was a sort of lack of preparation or lack of anticipation that this relationship was more than just about the border issue, that other issues also could come in. Plus, I don't think we were watching closely enough internal dynamics in China. Xi Jinping has changed his language on questions of territorial sovereignty and integrity, on Tibet. He's sent one aspect of centralizing power in China also. I mean, the effects will also play out in foreign policy. So I think in many ways we miss signals. I don't think people were not watching closely or that the signals were not being registered. But I think the problem was that we did not put two and two together. Now, everybody makes mistakes. But the question of the accountability exercise is, look, how did we make the mistakes? What are those path dependencies that we had in our heads that allowed us to make those mistakes? And are we sure that we will not make those mistakes again?
And you're saying that now is the right time to do that exercise?
Oh, well, the right time was yesterday. But if not yesterday, then let's do it at least now.
India, in fact, calls this the border issue, peace and tranquility on the border, an insurance for the rest of the relationship. And the Chinese view, going by their readout, is that let the border issue not define the overall India-China relationship. So there is still, from the Indian side, an emphasis on the border issue, on settling the border issue. And there is also in the Indian statement a reference to the meeting between the special representatives in Delhi, Mr. Wang Yi, and the Indian National Security Advisor, Mr. A.K. Dole. And this agreement included a concept called early harvest settlement. So where are we going with this early harvest concept? Where is it taking us? And there was also a reference in that agreement to the 2005 agreement on political parameters and guiding principles for settlement of the India-China boundary question. What is the significance of this agreement and to the present? And what is this early harvest agreement that they're talking about?
See, the 2005 agreement on political parameters and guiding principles is the first step in the boundary dispute resolution, because it puts forward exactly the parameters, the principles, as the title says, of the bounds within which the boundary dispute has to be settled. So there will be no exchange of populations or no affecting the settled populations, and it has to be settled on the basis of modern cartographic principles. So these things are very clear. So this first stage is done. Now the question is of really putting it, deciding, okay, what exactly is to be given and taken, right, within the bounds of this agreement. And then the third stage would be, delineating it on a map and then demarcating it on the ground. So now in this, the special representatives talks, the latest round, both sides use the word delimitation. Now, delimitation is a pretty big step. At the same time, they also use the expression early harvest, which is to say there's a sector by sector settlement, not a package settlement, but sector by sector settlement instead of a package settlement.
And sorry to interrupt you, the Chinese also use the word demarcation.
So the word has been translated as demarcation, but subsequently, I think the official statements say delimitation. So, I mean, there is some confusion about this, but I think essentially they are also meaning delimitation. But that is the other problem. The casualness with which these words have been interchangeably used, and the Chinese are very careful with language, suggests that, that they are not serious about this. I think on both sides, I think I mentioned it before, that the idea is to keep the boundary dispute aside because there are other priorities, international priorities, the economic relationship. The level of trust is so low that it's not just unlikely to happen, right? So, but you still need to sort of, communicate to the public, well, this is a priority, this is important, which is why these statements keep coming up. And I think with this early harvest talk and talk of delimitation, by the way, it's not exactly saying delimitation will happen, but explore the idea of delimitation. The committee will be set up. So, it's sort of, we play this game as children, right? 1, 2, 3, 9, 9.1, 9.2. So the point is, the closer we get, the longer it takes. So I think it's that sort of an exercise here.
But also delimitation, isn't it like the last step in the whole process? So has something already been agreed?
So that's the whole problem. I mean, it is a pretty big and significant step if we are talking about delimitation. But, given what we know in the public domain and the nature of the relationship at the current moment, it's just, at least to me, it's a bit difficult to believe that this has actually happened. So, which is why I say that maybe this is just, this is it's a show of things, but it's for appearance's sake. We say these things, makes it look like, okay, something substantial has been achieved. But there is going to be a great gap between saying this and actually putting it down in practice. So I think we must sort of leave it at that.
And there's also a reference in the statement about the punch shield principles. I think it's in the, I'm not sure if it's in the Indian readout, but it's in the Chinese readout. That the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence advocated by the older generation of leaders of China and India over 70 years ago must be cherished and promoted. They should work together to maintain peace and tranquility in border areas and not let the border issue define the overall India-China relationship. So, I mean, it's a bit odd to find the statement, and I don't know how Prime Minister Modi took it, because it's also harking back to Nehru. It was a leader he loves to hate. So what was this about, really? What is it? Is it for the first time that they are mentioning the Panchsheel Agreement in after all these years, or has it been does it find a regular mention in their China meetings?
No, it certainly doesn't find a regular mention in their China meetings. But the idea keeps coming across. I mean, often, it is part of the discourse. So one finds it a little hard to exactly pinpoint when this statement was last made. But the fact is, I mean, it's an interesting fact that the Chinese made a reference to the Panchsheel principle this time. It's not in the Indian side of the statement. And when the SR level talks took place, the Chinese made a reference to 2005 agreement, which is again not in the Indian side of the state. Now, one explanation for this is, well, the Chinese are saying it for the sake of saying it. Nobody believes that they will actually implement any of this, or that they actually practice what they preach. And that's a record. On the Indian side, you could also say that, look, what's the point of saying all of this when we know that the Chinese will, violate everything that they say? So, I mean, that I suppose is the level of that's another example of the level of distrust.
Yes, of course, the Chinese don't make a statement just for the sake of making a statement. That they must be pointing to something by saying this. What do you think they're making a real reference to something when they talk about the punch shield? It goes back to 1954, right?
Sure, sure. So I think there is a reference to the Tibet issue. I mean, the Panchshil Agreement was also our way. The first time we acknowledged that the Tibet Autonomous Region, the Tibet was a part of China, and that was the agreement in which we had pulled back our presence in Tibet, right? So in many ways, I think the Chinese are indicating or referring to our recent, involvement in the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday celebrations. The government of India sent 2 ministers, including one who is from Arunachal Pradesh, that is Mr. Kiran Rijiju, who's a central government minister, and the Arunachal chief minister was also there. So I think it's their way of saying that, look, we don't approve of your engagement with the Dalai Lama, whom they call a splittist. So I suppose that's one way of reading it. But the thing is that the agreement also refers to certain principles. These principles are important, and the fact is that the Chinese have violated those principles regularly and continuously. So in many ways, I suppose the joke is on them, because they play this up and yet they are seen as violating it.
Yeah, because just 8 years after that, after this agreement,
62. That's right.
We are 1962.
Yeah.
Next, I'll come to the part in the Indian readout of the Modixi meeting, where India is saying that we are development partners and not rivals, and that we have to work together. And China also uses the same words, nearly the same words, about being not rivals, and development as the greatest common denominator for both countries, and both countries should be supporting, promoting, and achieving mutual success. They should accommodate each other's concerns and uphold harmonious coexistence. Do you think India and China are actually on the same page when they use these similar sounding words? Are they actually coming together, or are they saying different things?
So I think that's a good question. I mean, what you said is correct. These are similar sounding words, but they mean entirely different things for both countries. I mean, take harmonious coexistence. I mean, in the English language, this is all milk and honey. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But when the Chinese say harmony, in their system, harmony can only be possible if there is hierarchy, that there is somebody to maintain order. So harmony is about maintaining order. So it's a very, it's another way of saying, if we have to coexist, somebody has to actually be number one and somebody has to be number two. Somebody has to take orders, somebody has to give orders, and somebody has to take orders. So there is a particular framework in which harmony can come about. And that is essentially, following the Chinese lead or doing what the Chinese say. So now, of course, when you talk about development, it's an unalloyed good. Development is good for everyone. And, you have to give credit where credit is due. The Chinese have a development model which has delivered in many respects. It has delivered at some cost to the environment, to human rights, civil liberties, etc. And also in terms of generating bad political behavior. We saw the effect on the Rajapaksas in Sri Lanka, when they had the choice of Chinese money. So there is that aspect also about Chinese development. But in the near term, ordinary people are looking at delivery. They want access to the internet, they want access to roads, schools, hospitals, and the Chinese are very quick at delivering on the request of political leaders and implementing. So there is a development model there that India has to contend with. And so that is when we talk about the international element. but also bilaterally. I mean, India's development path is incomplete without, now that we've seen how the West behaves, it's incomplete without Chinese technology, Chinese investments. And this is, I think, where the biggest rollback has been post-Galwan, where we sort of adopted a hardline economic position, banning everything outright without thinking of the consequences further down the road. I think the expectation was that Indian businesses, Indian technology would sort of step up and fill the breach, but that's not happened. Partly, I suppose one could say that the government's own economic policies did not give the space for that. And I suppose, the government's recent reform of GST, tax slabs, etc., is an indication that some of its policies have not worked and we need to incentivize Indian industry more. But look, in the interim, we need help and the Chinese need the market. So it's really not an entirely one-way street. The Chinese also need the market. The Chinese are in risk of suffering deflation. So, if they have to get out of the rut, they also need to expand their markets, sell their overcapacity. So India is absolutely essential. So
yeah, it is essential, but India already has such a huge trade deficit with China. I think our deficit with China is over $110 billion, I think $112 billion perhaps, in a total trade, two-way trade of $128 billion. So, I mean, it's massive. And one of the things that India did put up, Prime Minister Modi did bring up was what he called fair trade.
Yeah.
But the Chinese don't care about that deficit, right? So opening up to China in that way also exposes India to accumulating more of this deficit.
So, I think, it's not the deficit with any one country that we should worry about, but our overall trade balance. This is something that economists keep repeating ad nauseum because they just can't figure out what this particular issue is about. But from a political perspective, the issue is, for us, of course, is of dependency. And the fact that the Chinese weaponize this dependency. Yeah. So that is why the trade deficit with China is such an issue. And that's something that maybe the economists need to keep in mind. Now, having said that, like I said, if Indian industry and technology, hasn't stepped up to fill the breach, then, we will suffer this pain in the short term. I don't think we have a choice in the matter. We can still keep our tabs or we can keep restrictions on what we call strategic sectors, tighten our belts, and struggle a little bit further and ensure something happens, the changes required happen. But for now, if the Chinese are your only source of capital and technology, we'll have to do some. We have not an option but to deal with it. But we can ensure that vetting and controls exist in such a way that sensitive sectors, data privacy, etc., are taken care of. But that's a huge ask of the government. That's a huge capacity issue for the government of India.
You said something interesting about how the Chinese believe in this hierarchy, harmony through hierarchy. So there's another line in the Indian statement about working for a multipolar world and a multipolar Asia. Mm-hmm. But the Chinese statement only talks about a multipolar world. So here again, it's interesting, the gap between the two readouts on this particular issue.
Well, this is an old difference. The Chinese are not going to concede on this point and the Indians are not going to concede on this point. But so both sides, you see, it's been a while since we had a joint statement on anything. So I think that also tells you just how far apart the two governments are on issues of critical importance in the relationship. So, we'll keep doing this, and the Chinese will stick to their point. We will stick to ours.
You talked about the current geopolitics, and there's a line in the Indian readout about how this rapprochement between India and China should not be seen through a lens of a third country. that this meeting is not taking place. I think the message to China was that this meeting is not taking place because India got the short end of Trump's tariff stick. Does China see it that way?
For the Chinese, it's always going to be about anti-US coalitions. So for them, they see themselves as an existential competition with the Americans. So everybody, I mean, it's like the old, the American style. I mean, if you're not with us, you're against us. So I think it's matters a great deal for the Chinese that Prime Minister Modi, President Putin have come to China. They are photographed together. They are standing together, and the Chinese discourse power or the Chinese, communication machinery is fantastic. I mean, the Chinese Global Television Network or China Radio International, they have global reach, and so they are beaming these images into Lusaka or Lima or wherever,
Canberra.
and so people are seeing this, and so that itself will make everybody think twice about objecting to the Chinese or partnering with the Americans. So I mean, India can cry till it's blue that this is not aimed at any third country, but the Chinese are selling a very different message, and that's a message that is being sold much better than our message, frankly.
But was Modi able to take up India's other concern on terrorism emanating from Pakistan? And also, not just that, China's support to Pakistan in the recent 4-day hostilities between India and Pakistan after the attack on Pahalgam. And that has been also a big concern that, China has helped your arch rival, and then you're going to the summit where you're going to be shaking hands with him. Is that the right thing to do? I mean, the opposition is asking all these questions. And the SCO summit had there was this statement coming out of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit just this morning, where they did say the Pahalgam incident was, I mean, they condemned that incident, but they also condemned simultaneously the Jafar Express attack in Balochistan, the terrorist attack in Balochistan on that train. So has India been able to put forth its concerns in an effective way?
See, I don't think so. Because, I mean, the two attacks have been equated. And frankly, we played a part in creating this equation between India and Pakistan, right? So I think partly the onus is on us.
How do you mean we played this part?
I mean, the very fact that we stress terrorism so much to the exclusion of all other issues, I think that's a problem. I've said about this, talked about this before. I think there's a sort of a Pakistan problem in India's China policy, which is that we prefer Pakistan as the adversary because we think we know everything about Pakistan. We think we can handle Pakistan, but we don't want to deal with China because we don't understand China. We think it's a black box, and we sort of think if we ignore it, the problem will go away. All right. I mean, I wouldn't say that this is exactly the mentality within government, but I think within large sections of the Indian population, this is the mentality. And the government reacts to whatever the popular mood is. So the popular mood is, well, something on Pakistan gets us attention. Something on China is just, is a distraction. It doesn't get us enough. It's not worth the trouble. So I think that is what I mean when I say that, we play a part in getting the rest of the world to equate India and Pakistan. But at the same time, I don't think there's any reason for us to be surprised that the Chinese would do this. I mean, the Chinese are reacting to objective conditions. And the objective condition is that our economy has not picked up. We have, made mistakes in our relationship with our neighbors. We've really not managed, despite the neighborhood first policy, to maintain a consistently positive relationship with our neighbors. And so the Chinese will come in and take advantage. I mean, that's the stuff of international politics. There's no reason to be surprised about it.
So, now that you're talking about the neighborhood, President Xi also met the Maldives President Mohamed Muizzu, and they talked about a strategic partnership, having a strategic partnership soon, and various other things. Oh, my question really is, the India-China rivalry in the neighborhood has been a source of some tension between the two countries and between India and its neighbors as well. And of course, the Nepal Prime Minister was also there, and she met the Nepal Prime Minister. Prime Minister Modi also met him. But the thing is that, how is China's continuing influence and its development partnerships in all these countries, the Belt and Road Initiative, how is all this now going to impact the relationship further between India and China?
There are a couple of positives to what the Chinese have been doing in the neighborhood. In that sense, that look, they are creating a development, they're filling a development gap or a deficit in the neighborhood, which India, by the way, has not been able to fill, right? So, second, they are offering countries a choice. And look, if we don't up our game, there will be other players, and not just Chinese, but the Americans or the European Union or whoever else, right? So, in that sense, those are the positives. But the negatives are also equally important, which is that the China model, as I said, leads to bad political behavior. It encourages bad political behavior. It encourages lack of accountability because the Chinese deal, personality to personality, individual to individual, or at the elite level. They are not concerned about civil rights or labor rights or the environment. Though, of course, now as a matter of Chinese image building, they are also concerned about environment and green technology and so on. So they are filling a gap there. Look at how the Chinese have taken over Nepal's EV markets. Kathmandu is one of the most polluted cities anywhere, but now with the adoption of EV, that problem is likely to go away. And all the EVs are Chinese. India has not gotten any foothold in the Nepalese EV market. So there are positives that the Chinese do, but there are negatives in terms of bad behavior and the encouragement to sort of behave, irresponsibly sometimes, or in a manner that doesn't take into account geopolitical realities. India is a big player. You sometimes cannot ignore India. That's one. But by and large, I think the bigger China gets in these countries, the bigger the target also it becomes. You see how the China-Pakistan economic corridor has progressed. It's not as if China has won many friends in Pakistan. There are problems in the China-Pakistan relationship. We've seen problems in the Sri Lanka-China relationship. So, in many ways, countries are also beginning to understand China better. And that is a good thing. They will develop their own skills and their own capacities to understand China, and then they will come to a sort of a better position where they are able to assess better what India offers and what China offers. And really, it's a kick up the pants that we needed, China's presence in the neighborhood. And we have also upped our game in many ways. It's not all doom and gloom or the fact that we have not responded adequately. We have responded. In the neighborhood, we've certainly upped our game. And the neighbors are also learning that. But, sometimes politics intervenes.
In sum, what do you think? Did India come out of this globally televised, globally watched meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping looking better than it did before the meeting? Is its foreign policy looking more put together after this meeting, or is India still struggling to work its way out of the slash and burn that Trump did with the India relationship?
I think it's still struggling. I think we still have a long way to go. I think the emphasis there have been mistakes made. We really simply have to acknowledge mistakes made. We talk about lack of understanding of China. I think there's a clear lack of understanding of American politics also in our system. But this is the stuff again. This is international politics. We've seen worse. I think we live to fight another day. For now, I think we are on the back foot.
Also, I think it's a great lesson in not putting too much emphasis on personal relationships between
Absolutely.
leaders.
I agree. It has to be institutions and processes. It cannot be personality-based politics or foreign policy.
Thank you so much for your time, Professor Jabin Jacob. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for all your insights.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. Thank you.